The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meets and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. But tread the circle thrice about to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Tonight we're going to be wandering with my guest, Casey Zabala, who is the author and creator of The Wanderer's Tarot. Now, she is an artist, a tarot reader, a practicing witch, an intuitive mystic, and the founder of Modern Witches Confluence. She's also the author and illustrator of both The Wanderer's Tarot and the Weird Sisters Oracle, which is an oracle deck that's connecting with one's personal magic. And Casey has studied has a studied and intuitive approach to her readings while incorporating elements of natural magic and manifestation techniques to her offerings. She teaches metaphysical workshops which center on tarot and divination, and also includes crystal healing and magical self-care and principles of manifestation. And her aim is to guide individuals through their personal transformations with creativity and magic by teaching ancient tools to modern seekers while creating community along the way. Now, in addition to learning about the deck tonight, Casey will be doing chat room readings for those who want any, as time allows. And as always, questions and comments are welcome. So if you're not in the chat room and you have something to ask or you want a reading, you can pop over to paraxradionetwork.com and join us. Casey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, good. I think everybody's super excited that you're here, too. But before we get started, for those who want a reading, in the chat room, send me a note in private chat. And Casey, do you need any specifics from them other than a name?
No, I think just the name should be fine if they have and sharing that specific question, if they have one, I would be open to that.
Okay. And if they don't have a question, maybe just something general, a card pull, right?
Yeah, happy to just pull a card if you're feeling like you need some guidance.
Okay. Now, I read that you usually start your readings with an invocation and meditation. Do you need to do that tonight?
As we were kind of gathering, I was doing my prayer and invocation. So I've called in my higher self and my guides, and just a prayer to hope that whatever comes through tonight is healing, and that healing continues to ripple out as we move throughout our lives.
Okay, good. All right. There are people already wanting readings, but let's talk about the deck just a little bit, because it's a wonderfully unique deck in many ways. But how did the deck come to pass? I mean, what muse poked you in the ribs to create it?
Yeah, it was kind of a long journey. I'd been exploring making art based on tarot concepts throughout my teenage years, and it was always a goal of mine to create a deck eventually. But it wasn't until I was finishing up my bachelor's degree at the California Institute of Integral Studies that I was really encouraged by a lot of my peers to really pursue the project. So it was definitely a moment of having a lot of support, and a moment when I was in this very sort of like held creative and intellectual environment. So that was back in 2014 when I completed the deck.
Wow. And as we were talking about earlier, before the show, this is the deck's third edition, guys. So that says a lot for its popularity.
Yeah, it was an interesting process because I never really thought that I would publish the deck when I was creating it. It was very much really just a private and intimate process for myself. And then I gifted a deck to a couple of friends who used it for about maybe a couple years before I really pursued publishing it. So it was something that I was really encouraged to put out there because people were responding well to it.
Mm-hmm. And the cards are based on traditional symbolism, but there are some differences. Like the major arcana are the same as the classical decks, but the suits are different. I mean, instead of cups, wands, swords, and pentacles, this deck is moon, stones, knives, and feathers. And that was a purposeful choice, and you might want to explain why.
Yeah, so the deck for me is very much rooted in my own personal witchcraft, which is heavily influenced by elemental magic. So I wanted the suits to reflect tools that a elemental witch practitioner might use. So the moons are cups, the knives are swords, the pentacles are stones, and the wands are feathers. And so there's a lot of nuance in the kind of correlations there, which I'd be happy to go into. But yeah, that's the basic answer there.
Yeah, and don't feel like you have to edit yourself. You can, if you explain, because I might overlook something, just keep talking, jump right in. So just throwing that at you. Okay. The other interesting thing is that there is no booklet, as most decks have. Instead, you've enclosed a fold-out guide, which I think was a really great idea, because you've kept the information just exactly what we need to know. And that's because this is meant to be an intuitive deck, right?
Yeah, I very much was inspired by sort of the Marseille style of tarot decks. That for me is a little bit more focused on the energy and the numerology and the elemental associations. So that in that way, it really invites the reader to bring their own intuition into the process, which I think is a really a core reason why tarot is such a beautiful tool and is so popular.
Yeah, I mean, and the deck is beautiful in itself. I mean, what was I going to say? The cards, I mean, they're bigger than usual, but they're beautiful. The artwork is really simplistic, and I think unique. As I said, I can't use a better word than unique, but it's just one of those decks that you look at and you kind of marvel at, and then you hope that you can do it yourself, in a sense, Yeah. And so, yeah, all right. I'm going to have to go through questions because there's way too many here. So we'll get back to the deck in a minute, but let me find out. Let me get back to them because they're flying all over the place. Okay. This one is from Kathy. She would like to have a card pulled, and her question is that she has a lot of synchronicity happening, but for some reason she can't seem to get the message. So is she missing something, as in message or just in general?
Okay, that's a beautiful question. Okay, so the card that came for you, Kathy, is the Goddess of Knives, which correlates to the Queen of Swords in traditional tarot. And the Goddess of Knives is very much about being, maybe tending towards being in your rational framework, maybe overanalyzing, overthinking, over-intellectualizing these messages you're receiving. My sense is that, you know, you're at a period of time when there's some harvesting that could be done in your life, something that could be taken advantage of, or something that could come to a conclusion. So that could be part of what the message is about. But I would say look at the messages that you've received and how you've been receiving them, and pay attention to how your body feels when you're receiving those messages. Because there could be something maybe more animal or maybe more embodied that you could be receiving from these messages at this time.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. This is from the Wizard of Odd, Justin, and he wants to find out about his relationship status for 2022.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So we have the Ace of Knives for you, for your relationship status. So it would seem like there is a new chapter sort of opening up for you in 2022. It is the year of the lovers in tarot numerology. So it's definitely a time to be focusing on your relationships and focusing on the way that you show up in relationships. The Ace of Knives in this deck is a knife pointing to the center of a palm. And I think for you, it's really about focusing in on what your truth is about how you want to show up in relationships, how you currently show up in relationships, and what kind of relationships you are calling in 2022. So there's something about getting clear and getting focused about your relationship intention as you move into 2022.
Okay, that sounds good. And Kathy said, thank you very much. Harvesting, great help. Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, Kat wants to know if she can pick up anything about her, anything for her about her service dog.
What's the service dog's name? I wonder if I can get that.
Yeah, you can. We've got like a 30-second delay. So
okay.
as soon as she hears it, I'll let you know. And yeah, we're going to wear you out tonight maybe, but hopefully not.
Okay, let's see. Oh, my cat's meowing. He's getting the message about we're talking about animals now.
Uh-huh. Cats are very intuitive that way. Kat, can you give us your dog's name, please?
Okay, this card is jumping out, so.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay, 8 of Pentacles is the card that's coming out, which is really lovely to think about with a service dog, because for me, the 8 of Pentacles is really about like excelling at your craft. And in this case, it's someone who, you know, a service dog has a very real purpose. And service dogs love having that purpose.
I got his name.
Oh, sure.
It's Bear.
Bear. Oh, I love that. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's great. Yeah, for Bear, this energy is showing up 8 of Stones reversed. So I'm wondering if there's something about supporting Bear and really feeling like they're fulfilling their purpose for you. Maybe some kind of affirmation that can be added to your routine to let Bear know that you see the hard work they're doing and you're grateful for that hard work. There's something about honoring everything that Bear has provided thus far that feels kind of important, some kind of acknowledgement.
Okay. Sherry would like to know about timing on finding a piece of land. A good time to open her business open her business in the light of COVID.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so we have the 10 of feathers coming through. It feels like there is something that needs to be completed or some resolution that should kind of come before you're able to really move forward with this business. What I'm seeing is that there's a lot of things that are currently burdening you about your approach to business or the search you've been on, and perhaps it's time to take a step back and really let go of some expectations you've been holding, and free yourself up to be more spontaneous and more spirit-led in your search, and as you process towards founding this business, because I think there might be too much pressure involved at the moment, but if you can find some way to relieve the pressure, I think things will move a little bit more smoothly for you.
Okay. I'm going to give you a break and ask you a couple more questions. We've got 2 more questions from the chat room right now, but it'll be a minute, but let's give you a break. Because I know reading it after a while, it's like, all right. Okay,
Yeah.
So when I was going through it and trying to figure it out at first, I was like, whoa, with many tarot decks, readers are taught to look at the detail of every card, like the classic magician card, for example. I mean, he's holding up a wand. There are several items on the table in front of him. There's an eternity symbol over his head, and, depending on the deck. And there are lots of other things going on that we're taught to search and look for in the meaning. But your illustrations are very simple. And I don't know if that makes people really happy or confuses them with an oracle deck. But again, I think the simplicity is because of the intuity that you want the readers to read and use, their gut feelings and what they're coming up with, right?
Right. I do think it is, I don't know, when I try to encourage people to be as intuitive as they can when they read tarot, because I do think that's a huge part of the practice. It's not necessarily about memorizing meanings and symbology, although that is a big part of it as well. But I would say, this deck is really for people who want to challenge themselves in that way, people who are intuitively inclined and not afraid to let their intuition shine through. I would say, I get a lot of folks who are beginner readers who are definitely more challenged by it. And I think for me, having a really strong rooting in kind of elemental understanding, so understanding the qualities of water, and all the associations of water, which would come with the moons or the cups. That's going to take you really far in terms of reading any tarot deck, as well as the numerology piece, which I think is a really important aspect of this deck.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you open up the guide, I mean, there's numerology, there's the meanings for the major arcana, but again, it's really good to not have to think, because a lot of people think, well, I can't read tarot because we do have to memorize every card, and we have to, there's 78 cards, and then we have to get the reversals down pat. And I mean, it's really overwhelming for people. Right. And doing it, I mean, do you suggest, like, when they get the deck at first, just look at every card to see if it speaks to them, just get acquainted with the cards, but then during the reading, just let the intuition fly out rather than having to, be like the cookie cutter person that reads the deck.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think this deck is really an opportunity to kind of create your own set of associations. And I think there's a lot of like traditional tarot people that are probably squirming at me saying that, but I do think that, we're at such an interesting stage in tarot's development when there are so many new decks and so many iterations. And it's really a moment when we can all think about the evolution of this magical tool and how we see it thriving into the future. And for me, it's really, really about honoring the intuition and sort of resurrecting the intuition from these like relegated aspects of ourselves.
And, I mentioned reversals. Now, do you do reversals with your deck? I mean, a lot of people don't with any deck, but some people do.
I do. And I get it. That's a question I get a lot with these cards because on many of them, it's very difficult to tell whether it's reversed or not.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a guidebook, which I'm currently revising, that has all the images so you can tell when it's reversed. And I do offer some deeper insights through that, and that'll be coming out next year. But what I tell people is generally like to tune into the energy of the card and to get a sense of, how the energy feels like it's flowing when you turn it over and when you experience it. I think that kind of first gut interaction goes a long way, especially with beginner readers.
Okay. And when they first get the deck, do you recommend that they kind of cleanse and consecrate the deck and make it their own?
Definitely, yes. I would say typically what I do when I get a new deck is that I look at every card, I sit with it. I typically will put it by my bed and like have the intention to dream with the deck to see if it has anything to reveal to me in dreams. And then I would cleanse it and put it in a sacred place until you're ready to use it.
Okay, good. Let's talk about spreads for a minute, because is this deck suited for the classic spreads, or might specific spreads work the best, or just, a card pull? How does it work best, or does it depend on the reader and the situation?
Yes. I mean, I think it definitely depends on the reader, but I would say I use Wanderer's Tarot for my professional readings, and one of the spreads that I've adapted and use most of the time is the Mother Peace Tarot spread, which is quite a few cards, and it really does work well for me to see, kind of like a Celtic cross, a larger spread with this deck, because it shows you sort of the elemental composition of the message. So I really rely on reading, how many feathers are coming through, how many moons, they're really pointing to areas of your life that you might want to focus in on. And my experience with it.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the guide again, because it really is kind of fascinatingly easy. But it covers a lot of things. I mean, you talk about the court cards, you talk about numerology, and the court cards are different, that's one of the other differences in the deck, that, the page and the king and the queen, they're not there. But you've got the philosopher and the goddess and the prophet and the wanderer, of course. But don't let, for those who really read classical tarot decks, don't think that this is going to be more confusing or crazy or anything. Because, I looked at it for a minute and I went, oh, yeah, uh-oh. But after I opened the guide and I looked at it, you talk about manifestation, you talk about the suits, And, like I said, the major arcana. And then on the flip side, you've got the elements, the water, the fire, the air, and the earth, and what that goes with it. So, I mean, easy peasy, really. Just it's probably hard to break habits, when you're used to doing it one way. But it will be really enjoyable and it's very adventurous to jump into this. I mean, when we get done at the break and stuff, I'll tell you what my experience was when I drew a card. Just clear off the bat, right off the bat. Okay, let's get. We can get one more question in before the break, I think, and then we'll get back to the other one. Sandy wants to know about her health next year.
Okay. Okay, so we have the 9 of Stones, so 9 of Pentacles for health in 2022. So I would say this is a really good time to invest in your health. Next year it might be a good time to start some new routines that might be feel really healing or nourishing. I would say also tending on kind of like treating yourself in a healthy way. So what are the things that maybe feel a little bit more indulgent that are also quite good for you that you could dip your toes into in 2022 to really fortify your health.
Okay.
But there is this real sense of fortification for you. Yeah.
Well, it's always good to fortify it and be aware of it. So, yeah, okay, that's good advice. Okay, I think we can get the other one in before we go to break. Bruce wants to know what's in store for him next year, personally.
Okay.
Or if business falls into it, whatever.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so we have the 2 of Feathers. So Bruce, in 2022, it's almost like an invitation to really endeavor to look into your future and make some big steps, maybe some initiatory steps towards launching something. And also more broadly, just towards committing to the things in your life that you're most curious about and the things in your life that are most fulfilling to you on a soulful level. So time for making commitments to your growth, generally.
Okay. And a really quick question for the deck is Cece wants to know, was there a significance in the white on black design?
Yeah, I really loved the idea of allowing everyone to bring their own color to the experience. So for me, I'm someone who works with color in my own practice, in my sort of stone healing work. And I know how powerful it can be. And the choice to omit it was really another kind of push to get people to bring their own sense of energy to their readings and to their process. So that was the hope.
Yeah, I mean, and then I should say on the sides of the cards, it's silver. So that's even prettier. You pick it up and you go, oh, wow, this really sparkles. And they really are beautiful cards. I mean, they put together really well. The box and everything is just gets you in the mood.
Yeah, so. I love Wiser made the choice to put the silver edges on, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, so I think we'll take a quick break now. So if anybody listening in, you've got 2 minutes to either physically get up and wander or stay put and let your mind wander. Your choice. We'll be right back.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away.
If you end up with webbed feet,
Remember, you've been warned. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
Red, where are you going?
I'm going back to the paranormal view, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Red, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear. Line!
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, welcome back. My guest tonight is Casey Zabala, and we're talking about her Wanderer's Tarot deck and answering questions and from the chat room. All right. Let me give you one question just came in, but I want to kind of get this one out, my own, because this afternoon I pulled a random card, and I drew the Seven of Moons. So looked at the guide. The guide explained that moons represent emotions and psychic channels related to healing, and the tides of water tied to love and the creative. And the number 7 can represent conflict and troubles. So that was just enough information to kind of get my mind working and understanding the meaning of some of what the card was relating to. I mean, it kind of got right in the right place. So not bad for a first-timer with this deck. But if you pulled the same card for someone, what's your general interpretation of the Seven of Moons?
That's a great question. I would say the Seven of Moons for me is a sort of period of time when there's like a general malaise or confusion. So kind of the tension is having a lot of emotions and not knowing what to do with them. And so the challenge is really parsing through how to manage your emotions and how to sort of, for me, the challenge of the Suit of Moons is how do I work with my emotions and also honor my intuition at the same time? And I think the Seven of Moons really gets to kind of like the crux of that and the tension that can be created.
Okay, yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say between the two, emotions and intuition.
Yeah, that was kind of where I got there. And I think for a first time, that wasn't bad. And as we get new decks all the time anyway, we have to get used to them a little bit. And then it kind of flows. The intuition is better, greater. But it was kind of like, I don't know, I was smiling because it's like I was on an adventure. I mean, I was the fool because I, started the fool because this is something, it was a new learning process and everything. And I want to hear more about your intuitive approach to readings, because I read that it opens up channels between a person's daily life and their soul's purpose. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I think that sort of like in modern culture, there's this sense that we practice our spirituality, but then we have this mundane existence, and the two are separate. But for me, I really believe in being spirit-led and spirit-guided. and always returning to that connection with spirit, spirits that are, in the landscape, spirits that are in our home, spirits in the other world. We're really always interacting with spiritual entities. And so my goal as a reader is to really encourage people to see how spirit can guide them in their everyday life. It's like, I forget who asked this question, but the question about having all these synchronicities happen and trying to interpret them. I feel like that is something we're all experiencing. It's just whether or not we're listening, or and sometimes it's just about taking in the experience, not necessarily about having an intellectual understanding of the message. And I think, our modern world has been so trained to be rational and mechanistic, and that's something that I really try to push back on in my work.
Mm-hmm. Got another question. Patsy wants to know what's going to happen, or what's going with her life next year. Just like,
okay.
Get the go ahead early and know what right direction you're at.
Okay. Okay, Patsy, we have the Prophet of Feathers. So this card correlates with the King of Wands in traditional tarot. And the Prophet of Feathers is someone who is a mentor, finds themselves in a role where they have something to teach or offer to other individuals or to a community. And so it seems that you might be stepping into a new position of power, or facing a new power dynamic either within yourself or within your community. And I feel like there's lots of responsibility that comes with this role, as well as a lot of creativity. So I would encourage you to lean into your creativity, however that manifests in your life, and to figure out a way to really offer that to other people.
I will share her creativity because she's very good in art. She posted some things today, a couple of things on Facebook that were really, really well. And she's
Amazing.
Very crafty too. So she's got a lot of creativity in her. And so that kind of fits pretty well.
Maybe something to teach others as well.
Yeah, that could be true. All right. And this is, I talked about the other deck that you've created, the Oracle deck. I want you to talk a little bit about it, but for those listening who may not know, what's the difference between a tarot deck and an Oracle deck? And then get a little specific about that deck. Because, people are thinking Oracle decks are so much easier to read than Tarot. Tarot's got this thing that people kind of step back because it's scary. But what do you think the difference between the two, especially like in a reading? I'll let you say what you're going to say. I have my thoughts about it. So the difference between the two decks, and then talk about yours in general. Specifically.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But for me, I would say that the tarot follows a traditional framework, which is 78 cards with a major arcana, minor arcana, 4 suits, whereas an oracle deck has its own framework that the artist creates. So it can have any number of cards. It has its own theme and its own frame of reference. I think a lot of people think oracle decks are easier to interpret because there's not kind of the pressure of the tradition of tarot. But I think it differs from deck to deck. My oracle deck is called the Weird Sisters Oracle, and it was made in collaboration with the spirits of the Weird Sisters, or the Norns, or the Fates, the 3 figures who weave the webs of fate and who have shown up in so many different mythology systems throughout the world. Weird spelled W-Y-R-D, is kind of an Old English word that means fated. So this deck really plays with this idea of fate, the fact that perhaps we are fated, or we have purpose, we have meaning inherent in our lives. Not to say that we don't have any control, but really just to say that there is this kind of cosmic principle that we are all consciously participating in and working with. And the Oracle deck itself was an attempt to really merge a divination practice with a magical practice. So the cards have candle spells, they have sigils, they have magical tools, and it comes with a guidebook that offers spell suggestions for each card. So you can receive the divinatory message, and then the guidebook sort of helps you craft your own magical action to go with that message.
Do you think with an Oracle deck, the simplicity of the cards makes it easier to be intuitive because you don't get lost in looking at the little minutia in like tarot? I mean, some tarot decks aren't that complicated, but some of them are. You know, you've got the Empress, and then there's all this stuff around her, and you don't know if you should be looking at the Empress or you should be looking at what she's holding in her hand, or what, it gets a little crazy.
Yeah, I do think so. I think that's such a great practice when you're reading from any deck, is to really look at the card and pay attention to the images and, any information you can get. And I think that's also a good tool to use, when reading Oracle cards. I think there's just like a interesting pressure around tarot that you should know sort of these layers. There's all these layers of meaning built in. And that's not really present with Oracle decks, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. So I think a lot of beginners start with an Oracle deck and work their way up. They get, a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more self-assured, and then they can do that. And, I do both. And I've always said the Oracle deck was easier. I mean, I have the Witch's Oracle deck that I created, and it is very simple. I mean, the illustrations are just there. And I suggest that people don't necessarily need to look at the booklet either, because when you see an image that is so easy, look at like a spider, the spider card, for example. It's weaving its web. It's building its house. And if the web blows down, they rebuild it again. So this is kind of the feeling that you get, and it's easy enough to interpret, unless, maybe you have a fear of spiders, and that might, might make it a little difficult. But yeah, let's jump back to the court cards again. Now, which ones? You've got 4. The Philosopher, the Goddess, the Prophet, and the Wanderer. What are they equivalent to in a tarot deck, or are they not maybe at all?
Sure. Yeah, I do have equivalents, but I did make it sort of tricky for people because I put them out of order. So the Philosopher is the Page, the Goddess is the Queen, the Philosopher is the King, and the Wanderer is the Knight. And I did that because, just to be confusing, no, I'm joking. But the Wanderer for me, or the Knight, is one of the kind of more important, if I can say that, court cards, because they have this sort of interesting autonomy in the kind of archetypal realm of the court cards, because the Knight is able to leave the kingdom and explore. While they are kind of in service to the king, they also have this sort of freedom to make their own choices and to be adventurous, to be out in the world. And so for me, the Knight is really kind of equated to the Fool, in a sense, sort of has like a sort of energetic resonance with the Fool. And so that's why I focused my deck around the Wanderer and the Knight, and sort of being on that personal quest for knowledge and wisdom.
And I just want to let you know that Sherry said she thinks you totally understand what your reading was. And Patsy, who was the creative one, said she's planning to get back into art and her tarot readings. So you're right on the money there too. So just, kind of had to throw that out. Just so you know. And got one more question from Henry, and he wants to know how things are going to be for him in the new year also.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we have the Ace of Knives once again coming up. So Henry, in the new year, this is a year to kind of be more authentic and true to yourself. So really making an internal commitment to make sure that all your actions are really meeting your standard and your expectations of authenticity and integrity. What I'm seeing for you with this card is actually almost a statement of boundaries as well. So perhaps as you're formulating your intentions for 2022, you could incorporate the ways in which you're going to uphold healthy boundaries around maintaining your integrity and maintaining your truth, whether that be, speaking up for yourself more, really committing to upholding some kind of sense of self in your relationships. These might be things to think about. But it does seem like it's going to be a year of focus and intention.
Okay. Now, I was nosing over at your website, and you've got several workshops coming up in the near future. And one of them, I don't know, the first two where it said 2021, and the other ones were maybe older ones from 2020. Mm-hmm. But one of them jumped out at me, and it was one of the older ones. But I'm curious, I want to know about it. I want to hear more about the Tarot for Magic and Spell Work, because I've come across several tarot spells that at first I didn't have a clue what they were, or how to do it, but then ultimately I even put a couple of them in my workplace spells book. So let's talk about Tarot for Magic and Spells. Sure.
Yeah, that's something that I love teaching. I think that, in the course of Tarot's history, particularly with the Golden Dawn, there's a whole host of kind of historical information about using tarot as an initiatory framework in, ceremonial magic. So I think this is an important thing to be aware of as a tarot reader. I really do believe that images and symbols are magical things, and I think that each tarot card itself is a spell or a blessing or an invocation, and holds a lot of spiritual power. So when I teach tarot, I generally try to incorporate that into what I'm sharing with folks. Specifically, with tarot spells, there's this whole host of correspondences that we can draw on as tarot readers and magical people. So, for instance, the Ace of Moons, this is a spell, or if you think of the Ace of Cups, that like overflowing chalice, you can incorporate these elements into a magical working. You can pour water into a chalice and watch as it overflows and really be meditating on the abundance that you're calling into your life, or the love you're calling into your life. And so I do think that each tarot card could be activated in that kind of way.
Yeah, it was kind of really interesting, and it caught my eye. So I think there are 2 workshops coming up in the next month, or I think there was one coming up tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was another one. What are they, and can people still join in?
So tomorrow is one of my first in-person events in a couple years. So I'm going to be reading tarot in Mount Shasta, where I live, at Moonrise Canyon in town, which is going to be super fun. And then I do have a workshop coming up. I'm doing it with my community, Modern Witches. I'm going to be teaching, I'm not sure if this is on my website actually, but I'm going to be teaching a equinox spell workshop, which will only involve tarot and divination. And it'll be a process of kind of walking everyone through a way to kind of formulate their own relationship with the equinox and then create their own spells based on what they're calling in and the energetics of the season. I love working with the Wheel of the Year and divination, so that should be a really fun one.
Yeah, I saw there was also, you had a workshop that had to do with Imbolc somehow. I know I can't remember the name of the of the workshop. Is it candles or? Ay.
Oh yeah, candle magic for Imbolc.
Yeah, that was it.
Yes. Yeah, so I do really connect with the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and it's something that I really love to engage with community, and that's a fun way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Mount Shasta, and you got a woohoo from Ceiling Cat in the chat room. She lives up in that, well, she's up north. So just, you got a nice woohoo.
Love it.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to pick up your deck, and as you said, there's a couple of people that were beginners. Do they have to know any background of tarot? I mean, can they pick up your deck and just kind of learn from that one, or do you think people need to have the traditional background before they use your deck?
That's a great question. I think that for me, when I teach folks tarot, I always tell them to focus on the major arcana first, to sort of have this like backbone philosophical framework. Yeah. And I will say that my major arcana is fairly traditional. So it's a good place to begin. And then if someone really wanted to begin with this deck, I would just encourage some baseline like meditation on the elements and numerology, and that should really support folks in their journey.
Yeah, and again, the handy-dandy fold-out has all the numerology in it. And so, I mean, like I said, that's what I went for. I mean, first thing I went was 7. Okay, I went and looked at the numerology, and then I did the other thing. And I really agree about the major arcana. I mean, it is the most simple way to start learning the tarot. And then, you kind of branch off. And now, I mean, lots of people are doing just major arcana decks.
Yes, it's a new trend.
Do you think that, and I was taught this, and I'm not sure that it's true in the very beginning, but they said the major arcanas are the most important cards in the deck. And the other ones are just, second place. What do you think?
I would have to say that I used to ascribe to that philosophy that the major arcana are the most important. But I think that what's beautiful about the minor arcana is that they bring the teachings of the major arcana into our everyday lives in this really beautiful way. So you can think about the 7 of moons, in some way relating to the Chariot, which is the 7th major arcana, and how do those messages overlap and inform each other. So there are ways to kind of really draw the major arcana into the minor through the numerology that could really support people in their minor arcana journey.
Have you, because I've noticed with my Oracle deck, when I was doing tarot readings, and you know how sometimes you get a cryptic message and you just can't exactly get what it means, I grabbed my Oracle deck and pulled a card just to see, you know, if it, and honest to God, it brought the clarity to what I was doing in the reading. So it's like my Oracle deck works well with tarot. Have you tried to work your two decks together?
Yes, definitely. I love doing that. And I found that it's really can be very informative. And sometimes they'll reinforce each other, or sometimes the Oracle card will offer just a different way to look at the message that the tarot gives. So it's such a great practice.
Yeah, I mean, I was just doing it just because, you know, I thought, well, I'm stuck. And, you know, something, my intuition said, grab the deck and pull a card. And it really blew my mind that it really worked that way. And other people have said the same thing. You know, it doesn't matter what tarot deck they're using. You know, you grab that deck, my Oracle deck or anybody's Oracle deck, and it will kind of help clear things up or just enhance the reading that you already have.
Definitely.
All right, we are just about out of time, so I want you to tell everybody where they can find out more information about your decks, about you, or perhaps to schedule a reading.
Sure, yes. So I encourage everyone to follow me on Instagram. I'm at Wanderers Tarot. I am also on Twitter at Wanderers Tarot, which I'm finding to be kind of a fun place for magical folks. But it's new to me, so if you want to follow there, that might be fun. I also am kind of the organizer witch of Modern Witches. We host the Modern Witches Confluence every year, among other events. And you can follow us at at Witches Confluence on Instagram. And our website is modernwitches.org. We host a lot of really fun gatherings for radical witches, and are very interested in creating inclusive community in the magical sphere. I will be teaching workshops with them coming up. And in terms of readings, you can follow along or join my newsletter on my website, wandererstarot.com. And I'm going to be opening up my reading books in January. So I'm booked up for the rest of the year, but excited to be opening my books up for more appointments and hopefully connecting with some new people.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing it. And I put you on the spot when I said, you know, booked you in and said, oh, would you mind doing some tarot readings? And so thank you for that.
Enjoyed it.
And let's thank everybody for listening in as well. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet again.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.